VW Polo Parrot installation how-to guide. First of all, sitting in the car, to remove the stereo, it's quite simple. Get a trim tool underneath the corners here and pop the sides of the unit up, work your way around. And then remove the trim from around the radio. Once trim's removed, then reveals 4 T20 screws. Remove these 4 screws, which will then allow you to release the head unit. Alright, once you release the 4 taut screws, bring the head unit out and then unplug the aerial and the main block connector from the back of the unit there and there. Kit we're fitting here is a ck3000, to have all your parts to hand. You're also going to need your SOT lead, which is here, which is what we now connect to here. Alright, I've plugged in the SOT loom here into the car's loom. We've also got this blue connector here, which is for a auxiliary in, which we're going to now need to connect into the other end of the SOT loom. I've also spliced the wiring so that this is now free to give us some room to hide the loom down the back. So now with the blue block connected into the new connector to go into the back of the stereo, we've now got the old loom coming out and then the new one going in, and then we're going to connect the parrot loom into the middle. And with the SOT976 we have the red ignition wire, which we'll have to connect to the fuse box in a minute for an ignition source, which I'll come to in a second. At the minute you need to now plug in the harness that comes with the parrot kit. You've got male and female, and that basically goes on this end here and here, so we'll plug that in. And then we've got the mute cable here, which has also got a male and a female on it. So we're going to plug those together and we're going to tidy up the wiring then with some electrical tape. So we'll do that now and I'll show you what it looks like in a second. Alright, so what your wiring should now look like is this. So you should have original wiring coming out, the SOT lead loomed in, plugged in here, male and female into there, then coming up, no, down into the parrot kit, which then comes off here. Tidy this up, bring all your wiring together, tidy it out there, bring it down, and then up this end you should then have your male and female ISOs plugged in here, then coming up to the original car, to the, now it's going to go into the original head unit, and with the blue one plugged in there, so the auxiliary in will still work on the original unit, and all nice and tidy. And now what we're going to try and do with this is feed this down. I don't know if you can see, but there's quite a nice hole down there at the bottom. We're going to feed all of this down there and fit it in there nice and neat, and we're going to plug in our blue box, parrot box, plug everything into this end, and we've got the microphone which will run in a second, and I'll show you how to do that. And then we've still got to connect the ignition source to the fuse box. So alright, now just basically put this lot all in there, but remember, keep this one out because this is what we're going to be plugging in, and don't lose this in there because you'll need to reconnect your aerial afterwards. So just put it all in there nice and neat. Alright, so this is what you should have left. Everything else should now be pushed down there into that gap. You should have the blue box left out, the red wire, and your unit, your ISO unit plug, and the aerial lead. And what we're going to plug in now is the buttons. I think up the top here is probably going to be a nice place for them, quite easy to reach. So we're going to pop these buttons out here, put the wiring through, and then the other end of the plug down here is going to plug into here. So we're going to plug this in to there in a second, once we've brought the wiring through up the top here. Right, so I've just popped these two little button covers out. Very easy to pop out, just put your fingers underneath them and pull them through. Then I've got the cable here for the buttons. Push that through and it's just come out just underneath very easily. So what we're now going to do is we're going to put this up here so it sits there nicely. So you want to just put the wire in through the hole and then put the buttons back in. Make sure they're the right way up. And we're going to bring the wire through just at the top there, so when we clip them in it's going to look nice and neat. Try and do this with one hand. Oh, get my thumb out of the way. You can see if you get it in right. Okay, right, what we're going to have to do here is take maybe a little bit just off the corner here, just to let the wiring come through. So I'm going to do that with a Stanley knife. It's very thin plastic, so it's very easy to cut through. So we're just going to slice through here, just in the corner, just enough to get the cable through. Right, I'll show you what that looks like in a second once I've done it. Right, so I've cut very small. If you hold these up, you'll see here one I've cut and the other one I haven't. And if I turn it to the end, I don't know if you can see that, but let's grab this one first. You can see that I've cut a V shape into the back. I've then cut the edge out and I've cut a little V nick into the front there. And you compare it to this one and see where the difference is. See how I've cut this one, and this one is normal. So basically cut a V in the back and cut the edge out and then a V in the front, just so that we can bring the cable through and bring it out, and then the buttons will click back in and it looks nice and neat. So yeah, I'll do that and then I'll show you what it looks like. Right, so this is what it looks like when you put it back together. It goes in quite neatly. The little V is just big enough just to put the cable through, and then all the buttons clip back in. And then what I'm going to do is I'll position it a little bit in a second and get rid of any extra cable, and then I'm going to stick that down so it's flush, and then you'll just have that one little bit of cable disappearing off down there. So it should look quite neat, nice and neat. So that's the buttons, so they're done. And then what we're going to do is plug the other end of it here into a kit there. So that's that plugged in. Now the only thing left to do is run the microphone round. We're going to start off with up here above the mirror. We're going to pull the head lining down very slightly, and we're going to clip on the bit that comes in the kit that looks like this. This is the quickest and easiest one for fitting, or if you want you can pop out all this middle trim here and then stick the microphone maybe on the edge there, but it looks a lot neater if it's just hidden up out the top corner. So I pull the head lining down, which I'm going to need two hands to do, and then clip this up there, twist it around and then slide it along until that one little thing's centered there. Right, so we'll come back once I've done that. Right, and that's what it should look like. So I started off up here, pulled the head lining down, clipped it on here, and then just slid it all the way along until I got it into the centre. So you want it centred above the rear view mirror, nice and in the middle. Then once it's up there, get your microphone and you clip your mic in. Throw it on the floor. There's your microphone in there. So now we've got to run the cable in around the screen. So I'll untangle it and then I'll show you how we run the cable in. Right, now with the microphone lead untangled, get your lead, pull your head lining down again, and basically you feed the cable up around the edge of the head lining, bring it across to above the door, pull out the trim enough to get the mic wire around the edge there. Once you've done that, just tuck it in with your finger, so it's up out the way. See how that comes across straight? Well, we're just going to tuck that in above the top in a second. You need a little bit more than that. There we go. So, get your headline in, pull it down. And you just tuck the wiring up as we're going across. Yes. And tuck it right up underneath. Oh. Just like so. So now the mic's in there. Just reposition it straight. Comes across. Tucked it in around the edge, and then run it down behind the trim all the way down. Right. On the end of the dash we have a panel here. This panel will pop off. Use a trim tool and give it a bit of some force and it'll pop off. Like so. Boom. Pull the trim panel off. Trim panel comes off. Just clips. Put it on there. And now we've got some room to run the cabling round above the glove box and across to where the radio is. So I'll bring the cabling down, I'll tuck it all in the rest here, neaten it up a bit, and then I'll show you what to do once we get to here. Alright, so I actually pulled the piece of trim off and I've taped the microphone wiring all the way down. So we've got it all here and it comes out here. So now you need to get something long and thin. If you've got something like a wire coat hanger, that'll do. And what we're now going to do is tape the end of the mic wire here to something long like a wire coat hanger and then feed it all the way across to where you can see that light. If you look in the end of the dashboard you'll be able to see that light there, and that is basically in there behind the stereo. So then it comes across the dash and then we can connect it into here. So I'm going to find something to push that across there with, and then I'll show you what we do in a second. Alright, so once you've fed your cable all the way across, I don't know if you can see it's a bit dark in there, it's here, fed it all the way across. I used a very long screwdriver, and now it's time to plug this in into here. And then that's the last of stuff to be plugged into the parrot kit. So now you've got a bit of extra cabling here which you're going to need to tidy up, and we're just going to need to get this perfect and then stick this down into a position we're happy with, and then once we've done that, then we've got to connect the red cable to a ignition source. So I'm going to put the trim back on here. This is just on 3 clips there, and then you've got the tweeter at the bottom which we just need to reconnect. It's quite quick and simple. Just goes in there. Like that. Clip the bottom of the trim back into place. Give it a push down. Pull the door up. Just get the bump up here around. That's it. And then basically put that back in, realign the clips there back into those holes and give it a push, and it should just clip back in. So I'm going to do that, and then also we've got the end of the dashboard here, trim, which we just push back in like so, and then just bang them back on. It should go on nice and flush again. And, right, just put the trim back on, and then we'll put the head unit in and then sort out the ignition wiring. Right, well, trim went back on, just needed 2 hands to do it. Realigned it, gave it a bang, put the rubber back in, it's nice and tidy. Adjusted the buttons so that they're now going to sit nice and flush, and the cabling is disappearing off between the 2 panels, and then the wiring for the microphone and the buttons I've also tidied up and loomed up. So this lot is all now ready to go down into the back of the dashboard there. Remember to keep the aerial and the unit loom free so we can plug those back in a second, and then we'll go on to connecting our ignition source. Right, now it's time to connect your ignition lead. So get your red cable. For this you're going to need just a standard test light, so just a 12 volt feed test light. The fuse box in the Polo is down under here, just below the steering wheel and above the pedals. Unclip the trim, and we're going to need to find a fuse in this fuse box that turns on and off with the ignition. Once you've found that, we're then going to use one of. So yeah, you'll need one of these from Auto Leads, which allows you to connect a source to a fuse. So it comes off and then gives us a connection. And what we're going to do now is we're going to connect one end of your test light to the earth ring of the cigarette lighter socket, and we're going to turn the ignition on. So make sure your ignition's lit up, and then hang on, I'll put the light. Right, so now what we're going to do is, some of these fuses in the fuse box here I've got, oh there we go, straight away, some spare points that aren't actually being used for anything, and that's these ones up here. So this one here next to the 5, this one here, these are both got, I don't know if you can see that, connect in to your test lamp and they come straight on, and we can just double check that, turn the ignition off, and then look, they turn off. So that's what we're going to use. So I'll get the lead. Dropped it. So we get our lead. I'll put a fuse in there, put a secondary fuse in, just to make sure that we've got a connection and a current. So I put 2 fuses into here, into the fuse box. So plug this in down here, and then that now gives us a 12 volt switched ignition feed. So I'm going to run that through, bring the cabling down through up here, there's some room there, and from the stereo. So basically now get the other end of this red cable and feed it through and bring it down there, and we'll put a connector on the end of it, and we're nearly finished. Right, now we just bring the wiring through down here, so nice and neat from up there, so that's all gone now. Bring it out down here, and we're going to connect these 2 together. If you aren't able to get hold of one of these double fuse adapters like this, what you can do is put a flat spade connection on here, and then there are actually a couple of larger empty fuse spaces down there, and you could put just a spade connector straight into those, but then your circuit wouldn't be fused. So if anything was to catch the wiring or anything like that and expose some wiring, it might cause a fire, so just be cautious of that. But if you can get hold of one, just use the fuse holders. If not, you could always put an inline fuse just here inside the fuse box, just a little bit further down. So right, I'm going to connect this up and clip the fuse box back together, and then we'll get back to putting the stereo back in. Right, so that's all back together. Just neaten up the wiring in there and just tucked it away. So now we've just got to put the blue box right down the back, and then plug the stereo back in, which is just pretty simple. Just get the blue box. There's plenty of space down in here for it, so I'm going to put that down there. Remember to leave these two out. Yeah, that's fine. I'll just plug the stereo back into these two, put it back in, do up the 4 Torx screws, clip the trim back on, which is up there, and we're going to stick the parrot kit down and just make sure it's all working. Alright, with your stereo refitted, just check the stereo works fine. It's fine. And the parrot kit, turn it on, wait a few seconds. It should ask for a device to be paired.
Please pair device.
There we are, fantastic. So now, clip your trim back on, tidy up, stick your buttons back down once your trim's gone on, and that's it, job done. And there we are, all back together. Just clip the trim back on around the outside, put the 2 buttons on at the top, and yeah, just turn it on, make sure it all pairs up. And then connect your phone, passcode is 1234, and then just save. And then there we are. And the phone call should come through. Should mute the radio out. Just make sure your microphone is still up the top nice and straight. Everything's all nice and neat. And back together. And there you go, job done.